know Kieran. Kieran's going to talk us through strength, power and speed for athletes. And why do we focus on strength? How does that convert to power and speed in our sport? And he simplifies it. It's so simple and so important to do this. A lot of you are probably doing such a mixture that you're not actually developing strength, power and speed. You're holding yourself back. So let Kieran take us through it.
Hi guys, so we're going to go over strength, power and speed individually and how they then build into each other. We're going to go over the basic what, why and how of each of those, and then we will explain how that fits into a wider program and how you progress through them as you go. So we're starting at strength. What is strength? Strength is the ability to apply maximal force either through one or multiple muscle groups over a vast array of different movements. Be that body weight, be that an external load. Strength is a trained adaptation in our body. So what that means, it's an organic adaptation, i.e. there is a physical change in our body that allows us to increase our strength. That means increased sort of recruitment of muscle fibers, increased muscle strength and muscle size potentially as well is going to lead to that strength increase. So what we have, why it's important within a sporting context, gives you a greater potential to develop your power and your speed. So strength alone is not particularly useful for sports performance. Strength, when it's then applied with other aspects, i.e. our speed, and then develop into that power as well, is where the usefulness comes from, that strength. So what is really important too is our ability to hold positions in our sports, and then the stability in those positions as well. If we have the positional and stabilisation from that strength, we can then apply that to moving faster and then moving more powerfully in our sport as well. So a general rule for how to train strength, we want to be doing stuff that's heavy. We want to be doing stuff that is challenging our positions and challenging our stability to improve that. So a general rule of thumb, you want to be doing some reps, so generally anywhere from probably around 8 reps upwards is really going to start focusing into that strength. Ideally we want to be in that kind of 5 to 3, 5 to 1 rep range. So some reps for a few sets. So we don't really want to be training too many sets, but equally one set probably isn't going to cut it. We want to have that adaptation occur. So we need to be doing a reasonable amount of volume, but at higher loads, at more sort of tax for our system, we don't want to be pushing that too far, otherwise we're going to be going backwards, as Duncan said, maybe doing too much. And generally at or above 80% of our 1 rep max, if that's on a specific resistance, so a weighted exercise. Anything below that, 80% isn't really training and focusing on strength as such. It's more going to be into a more endurance or hypertrophy type area, which isn't what we're looking for in terms of strength development. Cool, so moving on from that into power then. How strength then moves into power. So what power is? Power is the rate of our force production, so it's how quickly we can produce force. The application of that is obviously vital in terms of our sporting performance. If we can use our strength in a more functional way, i.e. can we use it quickly, can we access that strength and use it when it matters in a game or in a match or in a sporting sort of environment, that's where we really sort of need to dig into that power production. We've got some elements of this and how we train it. So we've got 2 things, kind of strength speed, so strength dominant speed performance or strength dominant power, and then speed dominant strength essentially. And those are 2 elements of power that you train slightly differently, but all of that, so that kind of 80% to 30% range of our 1 rep max is where we want to be training within power. That's the optimal range of power production. So with that strength speed, so with our strength dominant power, we want to be using things like the Olympic lifts and kettlebells for training. So the snatch, the clean and jerk, power type movements whereby we're moving fast with moderate loads still. And then that more speed dominant side of it, so things like loaded jumps, so jump squats with some weight potentially, or medicine ball throws and drills like that where we're having to move a lighter load very, very fast. If we aren't doing these movements quickly, we're not training power. That's a real key distinction between that. If we're moving slowly within these movements, it's going to transfer more over into that strength or endurance side of it rather than the power we're looking to generate.
And just to clarify, you touched on it, you said like 30 to 80% is the kind of the weights they're working on. So 80% plus for this.
Yeah.
And 30 to below 80% to 30% for your power generation.
In order to generate that speed, you have to be using lighter weights. So it's two sides to it. So you've got strength and speed that make up that power, and you're looking to combine those. If you have more of an emphasis too much to one side of that, the other element is going to suffer. So if you start using too heavier loads, i.e. increasing that strength demand of a movement, you're going to be moving slower to do it. Equally, if you try and move too quickly with a load, if you can move really, really fast with it, probably not heavy enough even, to really be working and focusing on that power production. That's what we're looking for. Cool. Moving into speed then. So with speed, what speed is? It's being able to cycle a movement, and the time it takes to do that is really short. Yeah, so we're looking at that maximum velocity, maximum speed generated. And because of that, as we talked about just briefly a second ago, the weights are lower, even potentially just down to body weight. So if we're looking at that absolute speed, that fastest we can possibly move, that's looking at things like the sprints and the jumps. Generally unloaded, so it's going to be body weight only. That moves slightly then into some of the plyometric work as well, where we're having to sort of work on our rate of force development, so absorbing force and then reapplying it nice and quickly with jumps, dropping and jumping, all that kind of work. And then speed is a really technically focused thing as well, so it's not one of those ones, as we talked about earlier, an organic adaptation. It's a trained and a practiced adaptation. So it's important to get that distinction that if we train something physically is changing in our body. If we are practicing something, we are practicing the skill of doing it. So we are actually adapting our technique and improving our technique so that we are more optimally expressing that skill. It's not necessarily as much focused on a physical adaptation. There's necessarily no physical change that's going to make us faster alone. There has to be an element of practice in there as well. If we never practice on moving fast, we won't move fast. Cool. And how that's relevant to sport, obviously speed is a huge thing in sport. Yeah, speed kills is a really big phrase that's thrown around a lot, because if you can get to something faster, if you can beat a defender, if you can break the sort of line of defence and you're past that, if you've got more speed, you're not going to get caught. You're going to score the try, score the goal, whatever the sport is. I know what the application is as well. Speed is a really important part of that, and it then follows that. So we need to have the strength and we need to have the speed together to create that power, which is what we're looking to develop.
And when you're doing this, would you develop these separately? Would you go strength, power, speed? Is that how you traditionally program?
So in a traditional sense, yes, which is then leading on to what we're going on to here, is then you develop it through that. So you develop through strength, you develop the power, and then the speed. Because if you don't have the basic strength there, you then don't have the ability to express power or maximal speed, because it's such an important element of it being both of those things, so strength and speed. If any one of these elements is weaker, you can't express the power you're looking to do.
And you've got stability.
Stability as well, yeah. If we don't have the stability and the positions to hit the jumps and the sprints, we're going to be injuring ourselves potentially, and maybe at a lesser focus as well. You're just not going to be able to move as fast if we don't have the positional and the stability and the strength there at base level. Equally, if we then don't have the ability to move that heavier weight and that heavier loads quickly, we then can't go into speed, because we don't have the strength or the speed there to train an absolute maximal effort sprint, which is what you see in a lot of people. Potentially they just jump in straight, they go for a max effort sprint and they injure themselves because they aren't physically prepared to do that. So it's important that we build through those different stages.
And talk us through this. I really like this.
This is a force to speed or force to velocity curve. So this explains the sort of correlation, or the how they both fit together essentially. So if we look at this green line here, this is a force to speed. So if we have absolute speed, so the not absolute strength, sorry, it's the absolute maximum you could lift at one side, and then we have the absolute maximum of how fast you could go at the other side. So we have like maybe a 1 rep max and lift here, and a max effort sprint over here.
50 metres or something.
50 metres or so,
Meters, yeah.
So it's absolutely as fast as you can go and absolutely as heavy as you can lift. In between that, it's obviously a sliding scale, so it moves through that strength speed into that speed strength, and then through to that strength or speed over here. And how we train these different elements is obviously the loading and the speed of the movement varies as we go through that. What we're aiming to do is we are aiming through our training program to go from this green level, so whereby we're moving heavy loads slightly slower to moving heavier loads faster, which is then...
This is force and this is speed, isn't it?
Yeah, so what we're looking to do is go this way with the whole thing. So we're all looking to go on that sort of upward trajectory to a point where we're moving faster, we're moving stronger, and we're generating more power overall.
And the green ones where you are now?
Yeah, green one's where we are now, blue dotted line is where we're wanting to end up at the end of that. So yeah, that's looking at obviously the 1 rep max type stuff. Moving to here, this is looking at training moderate loads quickly. So the Olympic lifts, kettlebell training. Then we go down to here where we're looking to move lighter loads fast. So things like loaded jumps, med ball throws. Yeah, and then we go down to the absolute speed where it is just moving fast as possible. So with our sprints and our jumps and plyometric type training there.
Yeah, and no, that's brilliant. And how would that, because like too much strength, I think I know you've mentioned it, but too much strength training will slow you down.
Yes,
if you don't have this power.
So if we look at the example here, so if we have like a weightlifter, a power lifter over here, and we have a 100-meter sprinter over here, if we're looking to get someone better overall, we have to train what they're not as good at. If someone moving is incredibly strong, their speed is going to be low, so we have to really look at developing their speed to get that whole upward trajectory curve.
Powerlifter.
Yeah, so a powerlifter, for example, you're going to work on their speed to make them more powerful overall. Equally, if you've got someone who's incredibly quick but maybe necessarily not as strong, the way you improve them is make them stronger, and that's then going to help elevate everything. Because obviously, it's such an important relation between that strength and speed. If one element is lacking, then the other element isn't going to be as useful, because you're not going to be able to. If you're at 90% of your maximal speed already, it makes more sense to focus on what you're weaker at than trying to get that extra little 10%. If you're at like 50% of your strength potential, you've got a whole another 50% that you can focus on, rather than focusing on that small percentage difference. Focus on the massive weakness that you potentially have.
That's brilliant. And what, what would this be? How many weeks here? How many weeks here? Just roughly, so they have a view of.
Roughly, so you want to focus on each sort of element for probably anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks, really. So it depends on the sort of the point of your season that you're at and that kind of stuff. But generally, you'd focus on general strength at the start. So you'd work on strength adaptations to begin with. You'd then develop that into a period of power training. So strength to power conversion type stuff, where you're focusing then on, you're adding in stuff like your Olympic lifts, your loaded jumps, your throws. You then build into that point at the end where you're then adding in that maximal speed at the end there. But the important thing to notice is that you aren't going to train each of these individually. So you don't train on strength, then once you finish that, you forget about it, and you go to power, and you then, once you've done that, you forget about it and go to speed, because you'll then become detrained in the other aspects. So it's really important to make sure that there's an underlying theme of strength throughout the entire process. Once you introduce that power, you then maintain that going into the final phase where you're training on that speed. You shouldn't really be training each individually, because by that point you're going to then lost strength by the time you get to the power bit, lost strength by the time you get to the speed bit, and then you're weaker again, and so you're not going to be moving as powerfully. So it's important to have an underlying level of all three of these throughout the season.
Yeah.
And throughout the cycles that you're going to build into it.
That sounds great. Yeah, well, we don't want to bombard them with too much, but that's the basics, and I think that will help a lot of athletes. Well done, man.
Yeah.